most powerful evil in Star Wars history is not what most fans expect. Unlike the Sith Lords who built empires through conquest and ideology, Abaloth's threat came from a different source entirely. Her story begins not as a villain, but as a servant, a caretaker, and a mother figure to beings who would become gods. What transformed her into an existential danger was something far more relatable than ambition or hatred. This is how fear of loss, the desperate pursuit of immortality, and the failures of flawed cosmic guardians created something the Force itself could not erase. This is her complete story from the Star Wars Legends continuity, drawn from the Fate of the Jedi novel series. So, enjoy. The galaxy was not always governed by Jedi and Sith. Long before the Republic, before lightsabers or temples, a different kind of Force user shaped the cosmos. As chronicled in the book Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, these beings were called the Ones, and they existed on a plane beyond mortal understanding. The Father served as keeper of the balance, maintaining equilibrium between light and darkness across the galaxy. His children, the Son and the Daughter, embodied the living manifestations of those opposing forces. The son and daughter were not humanoid in any fixed sense. As beings of pure Force energy, they could take any form they desired. Killik historical records, preserved in stone panels for over 100,000 years, depicted them forming from the vapor of a geyser in an ancient world. According to the novel, the son appeared with a beast head and fiendish creatures after drinking from the font of power, a dark side nexus where strength could be drawn without limit. The daughter manifested with a luminous bird head after swimming in the pool of knowledge, a place where all that is past and all that is to come could be seen. These locations were not merely symbolic. The font of power and pool of knowledge represented tangible nexuses of Force energy, forbidden to mortals for reasons that would become devastatingly clear. Between these two extremes sat the throne of balance, upon which the course of the galaxy's future rested. The Ones cultivated civilizations throughout the galaxy in their own image, guiding species and cultures according to the principles only they understood. However, they were not perfect guardians. Balance was maintained through constant intervention, not wisdom or foresight. When civilizations were destroyed, the son and daughter would emerge from seclusion to stop the threat. The Killik panels shows the Ones at the height of their power, engaged in conflicts that shaped the early galaxy. Yet something crucial was missing from these records. The panels depict a father, a son, and a daughter, but there was no mother. The absence of that fourth figure tells a story the Ones tried to erase. Abaloth began her existence as something the Ones were not, mortal. As explained in Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, she was at least 100,000 years old, but started as a mortal woman who served the celestial family as a caretaker. Her exact origins remain unclear, but her role was unmistakable. She tended to the son and daughter during their formative period, functioning as the maternal presence in a family of otherwise immortal beings. This arrangement created an inherent tragedy. While the father, son, and daughter never aged, Abaloth watched her own mortality advance with each passing year. The inequality became impossible to ignore. She was not a biological mother, but she had fulfilled that role in every meaningful way. The thought of leaving them, of being forgotten while they continued their cosmic work for millennia to come, filled her with desperation. The emotional bond she formed with the son and daughter made the prospect of separation unbearable. Her motivation was rooted in fear of abandonment and the desire to remain with those she loved. As she aged, her desperation manifested in behavior that troubled even the father. The father had warned all of them about the font of power and the pool of knowledge. These nexuses were forbidden precisely because their misuse carried consequences even the Ones could not undo. Drinking from the font or swimming in the pool was explicitly prohibited, yet for Abaloth, mortality had become unbearable. She faced an impossible choice: accept her death and permanent separation from her family, or attempt the forbidden and risk consequences she could not predict. When the father's attention turned elsewhere, Abaloth made her choice. The decision came during a moment of distraction. As preserved in Killik panels, the son was attacking the father while the daughter attempted to defend him, and he was occupied hurling force lightning at both his children. While his attention was focused elsewhere, Abaloth seized her opportunity. The elderly woman crept to the font of power and drank, fully aware that she was violating the father's most serious prohibition. The font of power was a dark side nexus where limitless strength could be drawn. For beings like the sun, who was already a creature of pure force energy, drinking from it simply reinforced his nature. For a mortal woman, the effect was devastating. The dark side energy flooded through her body with no natural outlet or containment. She was granting herself power her mortal form was never designed to hold. Then she went further and swam in the pool of knowledge. She appeared in the water much younger looking, sly, and defiant, as the father used the force to pull her out. She had done what was forbidden not once, but twice. The pool of knowledge offered a vision of all that is past and all that is to come. Knowledge no mortal mind could contain without fracturing. The transformation was immediate and irreversible. Abaloth's hair turned coarse and long, her nose flattened, and her once sparkling eyes sank into darkness until only 2 pinpoints of light remained visible. Her physical form was rewriting itself in response to energies it could not properly channel. Her fingers elongated into tentacles, lashing out toward the cowering daughter and glowering son as the family watched in horror. The father stepped forward to shield his children from what she had become. What Abaloth had done could not be undone. She had wanted to remain with her family forever. Instead, she had become something they could no longer recognize. The woman who raised them was gone, replaced by something the Ones would have to imprison. Abaloth's corruption went beyond her monstrous appearance. She could no longer maintain a stable form. Her face would shift constantly, taking hints from anyone she spent time with. Sometimes she appeared as nothing more than a swirling halo of force energy presenting itself in female form, because mortal minds could not comprehend her true nature. Other times, she seemed exactly what she claimed to be, a lonely castaway desperate for companionship. Her abilities reflected this corruption. Abaloth could float through the air without needing to leap, drifting while her features transformed mid-flight. Her hair would grow dark and coarser, her face would broaden, yet her gray eyes remained constant. The Killiks came to call her the bringer of chaos. They viewed her as the counterpart to the father's role as keeper of the balance, associating her with strife and violence. According to their understanding, war was part of the galaxy's cycle of change, and when it grew too powerful, Abaloth came to destroy the old order and make room for something new, leaving entire civilizations in ruins. The devastation forced a response. The son and daughter, who normally existed in opposition to each other, formed a pact when Abaloth destroyed the civilizations their father had cultivated. However, imprisoning her required more than their combined power. The Ones created Centerpoint Station to reinforce whatever prison they constructed, and they relied on the Thurit Hive, a specific Killik nest whose entire purpose became imprisoning Abaloth. The son and daughter imprisoned her, but this was not a permanent solution. Abaloth could not be killed. She could only be contained, and that containment required constant effort from beings powerful enough to enforce it. The Killiks understood they would need to spend the next century building up their numbers to be ready when called into service again. Yet even in imprisonment, Abaloth retained frightening capabilities. When she was near, predatory plants that would normally attack organics refused to do so in her presence. She could imprison others through methods that remained unclear, such as when she trapped a Sith master named Zal in a cocoon. She existed simultaneously in multiple locations, possessing separate bodies that functioned independently while remaining extensions of her fractured consciousness. For thousands of years, the prison held. Then, the Ones died, and everything changed. The father, son, and daughter were not truly immortal after all. During the Clone Wars, Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi encountered the Ones on their world of Mortis. As Luke Skywalker would later recount in Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, the father was dying, and he recognized something in Anakin, a potential balance that might allow him to take the father's place as keeper of the balance. He asked Anakin to assume his role and maintain equilibrium between the son and daughter. When Anakin refused to take the father's place, the son and daughter went to war over who would replace him. The conflict escalated until all 3 Ones were slain, and their world died with them. Anakin's refusal had set off a terrible chain of events. With the Ones dead, The carefully maintained prison began to fail. Centerpoint Station remained, but without the ones to guide the containment, Abaloth's bonds weakened. Then came the final blow that shattered her prison completely. During the war against Sith Lord Darth Caedus, Centerpoint Station was destroyed. Jacen Solo had become Darth Caedus in his drive to change the vision he had seen, and his actions during the Second Civil War led directly to Centerpoint's destruction. Without the station's reinforcement, the last restraint on Abaloth's prison broke. The ancient evil stirred in her failing containment, testing the barriers and searching for weakness until she finally found it. Abaloth reached out across the galaxy through the Force, searching for minds she could reach. During the war with the Yuuzhan Vong, decades after the One's deaths, she found them. The Jedi had hidden their youngest students at a facility called Shelter, keeping Force-sensitive younglings safe from an enemy that could not sense them through the Force. But Abaloth could sense them perfectly. She reached into their minds, and they felt something dark and cold wrap around them. One of them was Ben Skywalker, son of Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade, still an infant when Abaloth's presence entered his awareness. Ben felt a cold tendril of fear sink deep inside him. The connection was real, physical in a way that transcended normal Force bonds, not metaphor or imagination. The tendril knotted up inside him, its cold filaments anchoring into his heart and chest. The contact frightened Ben so badly that he closed himself off from the Force entirely. For years afterward, he refused to access the Force, refused to train as a Jedi, refused to acknowledge the gift that should have been his birthright. His parents could not understand why. How could they explain to anyone that something had reached across the galaxy to claim their son, something that wanted him in ways they could not comprehend or prevent? Abaloth had not tried to hurt Ben. She had not threatened him or spoken to him directly. She had simply reached out with need, with terrible loneliness and hunger, and marked him as hers. Even decades later, long after Ben had reopened himself to the Force and become a Jedi Knight, he could still feel that tendril inside him because Abaloth had never let go. She wanted Ben for her own. She had always wanted him, and she was patient enough to wait. But Ben was not the only one Abaloth had reached. Other young Jedi at Shelter felt her presence that day, though most were too young to remember or understand what had happened. The contact left marks on them all, invisible scars that would not manifest for decades. When Abaloth finally escaped her prison completely, those scars became doorways. Young Jedi across the galaxy suddenly began experiencing psychosis. They looked at their families, their friends, their teachers, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. They became convinced that everyone they knew had been replaced by imposters. Some grew violent, attacking those closest to them while screaming accusations of deception. Others simply fled, disappearing into the underworld of Coruscant or the wild spaces between stars. The Jedi Order had no explanation. The affected knights showed no signs of dark-side corruption. Medical scans revealed nothing wrong, yet they remained utterly convinced that their loved ones were gone, replaced by exact duplicates who were fooling everyone but them. Two Jedi, Valen and Gisela Horn, had to be frozen in carbonite to prevent them from hurting others or themselves. No one understood what was happening until it was almost too late. Abaloth had not simply contacted these Jedi when they were young, she had planted seeds in their minds, connections that lay dormant for years. When she finally escaped, she activated those connections. The young Jedi were not experiencing psychosis, they were experiencing Abaloth's reality. Through her eyes, everyone looked like imposters because Abaloth could not comprehend a stable identity. Her own form shifted constantly, taking pieces from everyone around her. When she looked at others through her victim's eyes, she saw the same instability she embodied. The madness spread as more Jedi fell under her influence. Even Alana Solo, granddaughter of Han and Leia, detected Abaloth's presence near Kessel, describing it as something waiting in space that wanted to know who she was, something both sad and frightening. The threat was growing, and no one understood what they were truly facing. Luke Skywalker stood in the ancient Killik Hive, staring at stone panels that had not been disturbed in over 100,000 years. The carvings told a story the Jedi had never heard, a history that predated their order by millennia. As he studied the panels with Jedi Masters Raynar Thule and Tekli, the truth about the threat they faced finally became clear. The panels showed the Ones at the height of their power, a mortal woman serving them and aging while they remained unchanged. The carvings depicted her transformation, her imprisonment, and most importantly, what happened when she escaped. According to the Killiks, Abaloth was the bringer of chaos, and when she emerged, civilizations fell. Luke finally understood what he was dealing with, and the knowledge filled him with dread. Abaloth was not some rogue darksider or power-hungry Sith Lord. She was something older and more dangerous than anything the Jedi had faced in living memory. The young Jedi suffering from apparent psychosis were not sick. They were under Abaloth's control, marked decades ago when she had first reached out from her failing prison. But Luke was not the only one searching for answers about Abaloth. Far across the galaxy, another group had encountered her directly, and they had very different ideas about how to handle the situation. The lost tribe of the Sith had remained hidden on the planet Kesh for 5,000 years, descendants of a crashed Sith vessel who had built an entire civilization around darkside teachings. They had recently emerged from isolation, and one of their ships had ventured into the Maw, a cluster of black holes where navigation was nearly impossible. There, they found Abaloth. High Lord Talon, leader of the Sith expedition, brought his apprentice Vistara Kai to meet the being they had discovered. Vistara encountered Abaloth on a jungle planet near the Maw, and what she experienced defied explanation. The Sith were dying at an alarming rate. Those who interacted directly with Abaloth often did not survive, and even those who simply stayed near her for extended periods began to show signs of mental deterioration. Abaloth was not a tool they could control. She was a threat to Sith and Jedi alike. Talon contacted Luke Skywalker with a proposal. Despite thousands of years of enmity and blood spilled between their orders since the first schism, he suggested they work together. The Jedi and Sith wanted the same thing, to stop Abaloth before she could spread her influence further. Both had already lost people to her power. Continuing to work separately would only get more of them killed. Luke listened to the proposal in his quarters above the Jade Shadow, his son Ben standing beside him. The idea of working with Sith was almost inconceivable. The Sith had manipulated galactic politics, orchestrated wars, and betrayed every ally they had ever claimed. Trusting them seemed like inviting disaster. But Ben surprised his father by speaking in favor of the alliance. He had worked with Vistara before on Dathomir, and that cooperation had saved Luke's life. The Lost Tribe Sith were different from the Sith of old. They came from an entire civilization built on Sith teachings, which meant that they had learned how to cooperate instead of constantly betraying each other. Vistara had already proved such cooperation was possible, Ben argued. Luke made his decision, knowing it might be the most controversial choice of his career as Grand Master. Luke acknowledged they had one common goal, and that it would be better to work together rather than to get in each other's way. However, he made it clear that he would be expecting treachery at every turn, reminding Talon that few enmities were more ancient than that of Sith and Jedi. Talon accepted the terms with what sounded like genuine respect. This alliance, he acknowledged, had not seen since the galaxy was new. They would work together to confront Abaloth, and afterward, they would see where they stood. The terms were simple. Luke would keep Vistara aboard the Jade Shadow as insurance against Sith betrayal, while the Sith fleet would accompany Luke's forces to Abaloth's location. Vistara's father, Gavar Kai, was not pleased with this arrangement. His daughter had become a hostage, regardless of what diplomatic language they used. But he accepted Luke's logic. If their positions were reversed, if Ben were aboard a Sith ship, Luke would want to keep him there as insurance too. It was a shrewd move, one that revealed Luke Skywalker understood how Sith thought. The alliance formed, but tensions ran high. Jedi and Sith vessels traveled together through hyperspace, each side watching the other for signs of treachery. Every communication was carefully worded. Every maneuver was scrutinized for hidden meaning. The Jedi had to be ready for betrayal at any moment, while the Sith had to prove they were serious about cooperation. Luke shared his findings from Sinkhole Station with Talon. information he would never normally give to a Sith. But if they were going to fight Abaloth effectively, both sides needed to know what they were facing. Luke had visited Sinkhole Station before, an ancient space station in the Maw connected to the Ones. He believed they would find more information there that could help them understand Abaloth's nature and weaknesses. The combined fleet entered the Maw, navigating the deadly gravitational forces that could tear ships apart if they strayed from safe routes. The twin black holes ahead looked uncomfortably like eyes watching them approach. Luke's son Ben piloted the Jade Shadow through the hazards with growing confidence. He had done this before, and Luke trusted him completely. Communication was spotty in the Maw. The Rockhound, a massive vessel, hovered over the smaller ships like a protective guardian, ready to latch onto any vessel that showed signs of drifting into the black hole. Or, as Luke privately told Lando Calrissian, ready to intercept any ship that showed hostile intent. The most unlikely alliance in galactic history was about to face its first real test. As they drew closer to Abaloth's world, Luke gathered his team to discuss strategy. He explained that his goal was not to destroy Abaloth, but to understand her and reason with her. He wanted to make her comprehend what she was doing, if that remained possible. Killing a sentient being should always be a last resort, and her death might mean the young Jedi under her control would never be released. The Sith listened to this plan with barely concealed skepticism, having come to eliminate a threat rather than negotiate with it. But they held their objections, at least for now. Talon had agreed to follow Luke's lead on this mission, though everyone knew the agreement would last only as long as it served Sith interests. What they did not know was that Abaloth had already infiltrated both governments. While the Jedi and Sith searched for her, Abaloth had quietly inserted herself into the Galactic Alliance's highest office. She had assumed the identity of Chief of State Rokari Kem, a blue-skinned Jessar female who now wielded political power on Coruscant. Through this position, she covertly aided the Lost Tribe's influence over the government, sowing chaos even as Jedi and Sith hunted her elsewhere. But that was not her only disguise. Abaloth had also spread her influence to the Imperial Remnant under another alias, Admiral Lydia Prgorsky. She allied with former Chief of State Natasi Dalla to spark conflict with the head of state Jagged Fel, further destabilizing the galaxy's leadership. Abaloth preyed on connections and relationships, exploiting them with cruel precision. She specifically targeted people from Luke Skywalker's past, possessing those he had once cared for. She took over Akana Norend, a Falanasi leader Luke had once been romantically involved with. Luke traveled to Piter to investigate, only to discover Abaloth had used Akana to manipulate the Falanasi into protecting her. Later, she manifested using the body of Callista Ming, another woman Luke had loved. These possessions were not random. Abaloth understood that by inhabiting people Luke cared about, she could torment him emotionally while hiding behind faces he could not bring himself to destroy. Luke managed to defeat Abaloth in those forms, freeing his friends, but her essence always escaped to a new vessel. Even High Lord Talon was not immune to her corruption. Talon bathed in the pool of knowledge, seeking the visions it offered. The immersion corrupted him. His eyes took on the same eerie glow as Abaloth's, pinpoints of light shining from dark wells. The pool had granted him terrible knowledge, but the price was his sanity. He began to transform into something else, something that served Abaloth rather than the Sith. The corruption drove him to madness. Vistara Kai recognized what was happening to her High Lord. Before Talon could become a monstrosity fully under Abaloth's thrall, Vistara made the difficult decision to kill him. The loss of their leader created fractures within the Sith Alliance, but it also proved that Abaloth's influence could corrupt even the most powerful darkside users. When they finally reached the jungle planet where Abaloth waited, Luke could feel her presence like a weight on his chest. Everything they had learned, everything they had risked by allying with their ancient enemies had brought them to this critical moment. Jedi and Sith would face Abaloth together, and the outcome would determine the fate of every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy. What they did not know was that the real battle would not take place in the physical world at all. The comparison between Abaloth and the Sith reveals why she represented a different category of threat. Sith sought domination through ideology and control, building empires and enforcing their will upon others. Abaloth's approach was more intimate and invasive. She did not want servants or subjects. She wanted to possess Force users entirely, erasing their individual existence. Her promises revealed her twisted understanding of relationships. She told Ben he would become the eternal Prince of Light, burning the twin flames of justice and forgiveness. She told Vistara she would become the irresistible daughter of the night, guarding forbidden mysteries and bringing life to the galaxy by filling dreams with beauty and desire. The three of them would become the Ones, living forever and remaking the galaxy however it suited them. She offered a partnership, but her true intention was absorption. She possessed multiple bodies simultaneously. Luke Skywalker killed one of her physical forms, yet she continued operating through others. She spoke through different vessels, her voice taking on characteristics of whoever she had taken over, but with an edge so cold and vengeful, it was immediately identifiable. She was powerful and dangerous enough to force Grandmaster Luke Skywalker into an alliance with the Sith to fight her. Even the Sith themselves disagreed on how to handle her. Some saw her as a tool to exploit, a weapon to wield for their own glory. Others recognized that Sith were dying at an alarming rate simply from interacting with her. Abaloth's power made conventional approaches futile. She would grow into a being beyond mortal comprehension if not stopped. With the dark side hers to command, she could reshape the galaxy in any manner she wished. Her agony itself became a weapon, releasing nearly inconceivable amounts of Force energy. The final confrontation would take place across multiple battlefields simultaneously. Luke understood that Abaloth existed on multiple levels. Her physical forms were just extensions of her true self, which resided somewhere beyond the material world. To truly face her, he would need to follow ancient techniques practiced by beings called Mind Walkers, Force users who believed that physical existence was an illusion and that consciousness could separate from the body entirely. Luke secured himself in a bunk aboard the Rude Awakening and entered a meditative trance deeper than any he had attempted before. He focused on the code of the Mind Walkers. There is no life, there is only the Force. His consciousness separated from his physical form, rising above it, leaving the material world behind. He walked through a timeless void where seconds might last days, or days might pass in seconds. Luke arrived at the Lake of the Apparitions, a place that existed purely in the Force, where consciousness took form and could interact. This was the realm where Abaloth's true essence resided, and she was waiting for him. Her gray silhouette emerged from silver mists, long saffron hair cascading down to the water, tiny eyes shining from sockets as deep as wells. Luke reached for a lightsaber that did not exist in this place, but Abaloth struck first with Force lightning that blasted through him like physical agony. Then, someone else appeared, a tattooed man Luke had seen watching the conflict on Coruscant. The stranger was Sith, but not from the Lost Tribe. His face bore permanent ink markings that the Lost Tribe would never use, and his manner was harder, more ancient. When Luke questioned who he was, the stranger gave a cryptic answer. With the Ones gone, there was only one way to stop Abaloth: Jedi and Sith together. The Sith understood something about Abaloth that Luke did not. He moved with purpose, driving his fingers deep into Abaloth's form as Luke held her from behind. They grappled in ways that defied physical law, their essences merging and tearing, causing damage that no weapon in the material world could inflict. Tentacles lashed at Luke's face, probing for his eyes and mouth. One caught his right eye, and the socket exploded in pain. The stranger drove his hand deeper into Abaloth, searching for something vital to destroy. Black Force energy sprayed from the wound as she writhed and howled. For what felt like hours or seconds, they battled across the surface of the Lake of Apparitions. Abaloth tried to drain Luke's essence, then the stranger's, then Luke's again. She threw force blasts that would have killed them instantly in the physical world. Her face shifted like melting wax, tentacles erupting from her torso as she lost control of her form. While Luke fought beyond shadows, Abaloth's avatars faced destruction in the physical world. Ben Skywalker and Vistara Kai had been captured by Abaloth and brought to the courtyard of the Font of Power. Abaloth attempted to force them to drink from the font, wanting to corrupt them as she had been corrupted. She had starved them, denied them water, knowing their desperation would eventually drive them to the dark side nexus. But Ben and Vestara resisted. When Abaloth attacked them in her Kashiri form as Lady Coralie, they fought back together. Vestara drew on the font's power to unleash devastating force lightning, while Ben used tactical diversion, hurling broken pillars at their enemy. The Kashiri avatar was powerful, but working together, Ben and Vestara finally destroyed that body at the Font of Power. On Coruscant, the Jedi strike team confronted Abaloth's presence in the temple's computer core. The avatar impersonating Chief of State Rakari Kem was eliminated, her political manipulation brought to an end. Every physical form Abaloth had created across the galaxy was being systematically destroyed. In the realm beyond shadows, the battle reached its climax. Abaloth attacked both Luke and the Sith at once, her tentacles piercing through them and destroying them from within in ways no lightsaber could match. But the Sith managed to drive his weapon through her chest. Her force essence began gushing out from the wound, but she continued fighting, her face shifting and tentacles erupting as she thrashed and howled. With her essence pouring out, she had to kill them immediately or face destruction. But Luke and the Sith refused to let go despite their wounds. When Luke finally observed her pale form beginning to vanish in the Lake of Apparitions, he watched her shrink from the size of a thigh to a foot, then a finger, then a mere sliver before slipping from sight. Back in the physical world, Luke's body screamed. His companions rushed to the medbay, where he lay unconscious with wounds that should not have been possible. His right eye was damaged, and he had injuries to his chest that medical droids could not explain. The wounds had been inflicted beyond shadows, in a realm where spirit fought spirit. It marked the end of one of the most dangerous beings the galaxy had ever known. With Abaloth's death, the effects of her influence began to lift. The Jedi Knights who had been driven insane by her presence finally returned to normal. Valen and Gisela Horn emerged from carbonite freezing with their minds restored. The delusions about imposters vanished along with Abaloth's corrupting touch. The young Jedi who had been marked as children at Shelter were finally free. Abaloth's threat surpassed even the Sith. Her danger came not from ambition, but from refusal to accept natural loss, and that made her different from any darkside user in galactic history. Abaloth's story reveals what happens when the Force is left in the hands of flawed guardians, and her shadow extends far beyond her own legend. The pursuit of immortality has claimed others throughout galactic history, including a Sith Lord whose experiments unlocked the very secret Abaloth sought, only to be destroyed by his own apprentice. And long before the Ones walked their path, the first Force users gathered on a forgotten world, establishing traditions that would shape the Jedi Order thousands of years later. To see how the quest to conquer death continues to corrupt even the wisest, explore the tragedy of the wise. And to discover where the balance between light and dark truly began, journey back to the dawn of the Jedi.